Hello, I'm a Dragon, and this video is about She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the show worth watching for a single character. Now, that does not mean that every other character is bad, more so that if the only enjoyment I got was from this character, the full 52 episode run would have still been worth it. Hell, even without that character, the show would be enjoyable enough. There's a number of things to really like about it. It really nails this tone that's appropriate for the younger watchers that will absolutely be drawn to it, while maintaining both drama and humor that a much wider audience can get into. It is hella queer, which isn't terribly important to me personally, but there's a crowd who will show up for just that, and I'll let someone a little bit more knowledgeable about it speak about that. It also has a pretty rich lore, which isn't surprising considering it seems to have copy and pasted Jak and Daxter. Oh, you're a bit skeptical about that. Oh, okay, well, first off, let's build our protagonist. Let's say long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a headband. A split skirt tank top tunic with some kind of radial pattern, shorts, knee-high boots, and pauldrons, alright? They live in a science fantasy setting with infrastructure throughout the planet built by an ancient alien race with totally, absolutely different names. In Jak and Daxter it's the precursors, in She-Ra it's the first ones. There's technology that's indistinguishable from magic, and each of them has some kind of tech wizard that's able to repurpose and revive this ancient advanced technology, despite the fact that tech does not work like that. The protagonists also use the power of this magic tech to turn into alternate forms, granting increased strength and abilities. The third installment dumps the characters into a desert out of nowhere, and it's revealed that a protagonist is one of that ancient race. Daxter's a precursor, Adora's a first one. Both Jak and Adora arrived where they now reside through a portal from elsewhere, and both of their calls to adventure was them and their friend on a boat ride to a forbidden land. And, to cap it all off, Jak and Adora both investigate an ancient warrior who fought to protect the planet, chosen by the precursors or first ones respectively, and end up being a spiritual successor to said warrior who kind of, in a way, ends up being themselves. These warriors also have totally unique names. In She-Ra, it's Mara. Jak and Daxter takes a completely different turn. His name is Mar. See, it's Mar. It's different. It's totally different. Oh, right, where was I? Ah, yes, the characters. So, while not all of the characters carry their weight dramatically, and certainly not at all points in the story, only a couple are really irritating. Some of the characters who I don't find interesting dramatically are among the most entertaining to have on screen. Like the ray of sunshine that is Scorpia.
I am brave, strong, loyal, and I give great hugs.
Or sea shanty ship scorcher Seahawk.
If you're looking for adventure, then I am your man.
On the other hand, the mistake manufacturing plant Glimmer.
Every decision I've made in the last day has almost gotten us killed.
Or personality not detected Light Hope.
Creepy. Yes, I have been called this before.
Both of whom I find very interesting, are not as much fun to have on screen. There are a number who bridge this gap though. Micah and Double Trouble, who both show up in the last stretch of the story but aren't around enough to fully flesh out. Shadow Weaver, who's fully fleshed out but nebulous enough that I still haven't fully pinned down her character. And our hero, Adora. Main protagonist, the She-Ra, defector from the Horde, the champion of perseverance, strength, and courage, friend to everyone. And she gets beat down on the daily by an inferiority complex given form, and that form is a cat girl in a leotard. That's right, the best character in the show is Catra, and it's not by a particularly close margin. Catra's choices actually push the series forward in a much more meaningful way than anything the protagonists do in every season but the fourth, and she's the only one that develops at a consistent rate throughout the show. It's almost like she is the main character instead of Adora. In fact, Catra's development changes can very clearly be mapped between each different season. And while it's not the only reason she's the best character, it is the bulk of it, and it deserves to be explained why in exhaustive detail. So here it is, in exhaustive detail.
What happened to Adora? What did you do?
What did I do? She left us. She left me.
Catra jumped on board as the most interesting character very early. When Adora tells her she knows Hordak and Shadow Weaver have been manipulating them, Catra acts like it's obvious.
Duh! Did you just figure that out?
She was never ignorant of what the Horde was doing, she just doesn't see a way out of it. To her, Adora's ideas of defecting are a weird little identity crisis, and there's not actually a way out of it. The way out is not to fight against it, but to work their way through it, to climb the ladder.
The two of us look out for each other, and soon we'll be the ones calling the shots.
Adora leaving is upsetting to her, not just because the person closest to her isn't around anymore, but because it shows a betrayal of what Catra thought the goal was all along. And because without Adora, Shadow Weaver is more abusive than usual. Catra soon gets the idea of leaving as well.
Adora's gone. She defected, and I'm starting to think she had the right idea.
But soon after is given a promotion. Huge turning point. Without it, Catra may have left also, but with validation about her own way of achieving her goals, she decides to stick around. But nothing has actually functionally changed. Shadow Weaver is still as abusive as before, Catra is still scared of her, and her mission is still to retrieve Adora. But it shows that Hordak has respect for Catra, respect that Shadow Weaver had denied constantly. So, what does Catra do next? Well, she goes to prom, and has a blast because for the first time in a long time, Catra has demanded Adora's full attention. The Horde capture Bow, Glimmer, and the Magic Sword. First on-screen victory for the Horde, entirely orchestrated by Catra, and Shadow Weaver still only wants Adora.
Report to the Force Captain Barracks and pack your things. Now that Adora is back, there's no need for you there.
Adora comes to trade herself for Glimmer, but Adora being around, especially of her own accord, only puts Catra in a worse position than before, so she does what any self-respecting villain would do. She gives back the sword.
This is not because I like you.
You liar. She gives it back because it means Catra still has a place in the Horde. With Adora back, there's no room for her own ideas about ascending the Horde leadership as plans for freedom. And with Catra's newfound confidence from such a success, Shadow Weaver's abuse seems much less significant. She seems almost sympathetic to her, in fact. That is, before Shadow Weaver lashes out again. Episode 11 happens. Memory flashback stuff, and not much needs to be discussed there. Just that, it seems Adora's the only one who was ever nice to Catra ever. They promised they'd always look out for each other. Catra has this deeply ingrained,
Nothing really bad can happen as long as we have each other.
You promise?
and she's convinced that Adora broke this promise. And I mean, she's wrong, but she's not really wrong. Adora was the one who left, and by calling out the Horde on its fundamental problems, she's criticizing Catra's idea of ascending that power structure. She stopped being blunt support and started being challenging, and in Catra's life, separated into people who abuse her, which is everybody except Adora. And Adora, that could absolutely seem like abuse. So it's here where she cuts ties for good. No more dragging Adora back to Shadow Weaver. Catra has gone full-on baddie. When she gets back to the Fright Zone, she betrays and defeats Shadow Weaver with Hordak's blessing before launching a full-scale attack on Bright Moon. So, in Season 1, Catra's arc is defined by her relationship to two people, Adora and Shadow Weaver. With Adora, her feelings are a lot more mixed. She's angry, she's heartbroken, she's insulted.
This is what you left me for? Dress-up games and a light show?
But for the vast majority of the season, the feelings are entirely negative about her departure. That is, until episode 9. Shadow Weaver's insistence upon Adora over her taught Catra that she can be her own person, and her plan to climb the Horde chain of command is still as viable as it ever was, especially with her immediate superior prioritizing the wrong objectives. And Shadow Weaver's abuse didn't steer Catra down a subordinate path at all, but instead just solidified her contempt for Shadow Weaver. The only thing it did was push her to be more hateful and more vicious, despite multiple showings of Catra being relatively humane for the evil rival character, even towards Shadow Weaver at times. These two factors together, Catra's newly developed independence from Adora's abandonment, alongside her intensified cruelty from Shadow Weaver, push her to where we see her in Season 2. Higher up on the ladder as Hordak's second in command.
It doesn't matter how hard I work or what I do for the Horde. Hordak doesn't trust me. He never listens to me.
In Season 2, Catra's arc is actually pretty devoid of Adora for the only time in the show. Instead, it's about Shadow Weaver still, as well as Hordak and Entrapta. With Shadow Weaver, Catra seems to hang around doing an odd combination of things. First, to gloat about how well she's doing.
I've been busy helping the Horde get closer than it's ever been to defeating the rebellion.
And second, to ask for advice.
Then help me! Come up with something so you can stay!
She seems to be stuck doing things she's not particularly excited about, being ripped on by Hordak, and generally slipping directly into the space Shadow Weaver vacated. And she's not particularly good at it, to the point where her personal new recruit to the Horde side, Entrapta, is Hordak's new favorite, and not his recently promoted second in command. It gets so bad that she starts going to Shadow Weaver, not for bragging purposes, but for comfort. That is your big red flag showing things have for sure gone south. Remember, my segment on last season was all about Catra's relationship with two characters. It was named Abused Catra, and it sure as hell wasn't Adora doing the abusing. And this gets even worse when Hordak orders her banished, causing that sympathy to grow even less healthy under time constraints. The salt in the wound is that he's consulting with Entrapta as casual as ever when he orders this. So, Catra starts trying to pump Shadow Weaver for information to prove she's useful and should stay in the Fright Zone, framing it like she's trying to save Shadow Weaver. Because she is. Shadow Weaver gives nothing, but asks for an old keepsake. Next time Catra returns, Shadow Weaver is, oddly, kind of sweet with her, in like a really weird encouraging way, which is super manipulative, except Catra had already brought the item Shadow Weaver was looking for, despite implying earlier that she wouldn't bring it.
You don't get to ask things of me anymore.
Because as much as Catra puts effort into being the big bad, that isn't what she wants. What she's wanted from the beginning is a way out of her present life of being the subject of others' anger. So when she has the opportunity to take what was once anger and turn it into something relatively positive, she cannot jump on that quickly enough. This results in Shadow Weaver escaping, lashing out at others, and lying to Hordak about it. And now, here is where we reflect back on Catra and Adora's first conflict, where Catra says that whatever else happens may as well happen because we need to protect each other. It looks like Adora was never the one who needed protection. All of Shadow Weaver's judgment had been centered on Catra since forever. When she wants to bring Adora back to the Fright Zone, it's not strictly because of friendship and them sticking together. It is out of safety. Her perception is that Shadow Weaver will always have control over her, and Adora is the one who can stop that. This is clear when she states why she wants Adora back home.
And if I don't bring you back, Shadow Weaver's gonna have my head.
That doesn't need to be strictly referring to this mission. It's a general statement. The only thing that kept Shadow Weaver's full wrath from her was Hordak's promotion, and that didn't even shield her fully. So, Catra is now exactly where she was back at the beginning. Her confidant in the Fright Zone has abandoned her, and she risks punishment from higher up, but this time, she doesn't even like the person who left her. This means there's nobody to shelter her from punishment as the second in command, and she has an even less healthy relationship with her deserter this time around. She was so close too. With just one person left to go, she would have been on top of the Horde. Finally, the freedom she fights so hard for, and it's ripped away. It's enough to make anyone become unhinged.
So, here's the thing. I've done this. The whole threatening people bit, the intimidation. I've been there, and I just don't care anymore.
While Catra's arc in the previous 2 seasons are tied to other characters, this time around it's less focused on individual relationships and jumps around a bit. In the beginning of the season, she's kind of somber and introspective. Season 3 Catra just does not care. For the first time in a while, she seems to have a really accurate perception of what's actually going on, despite the gloomy outlook on it.
I never stood a chance. I did everything right. But it doesn't matter what I do. I don't get to win. Caring about people is what got me into this mess.
And she's not just comfortable, but gleeful in exclaiming that the Emperor has no clothes.
You need me, just like you needed Shadow Weaver, because you have no idea how to run this place.
She also has this divine moment of lampshading.
Because Adora and her friends are always after the same thing we are. Of course they're in the literal middle of nowhere.
So then, this is the part where she starts to recover from her previous mistakes, right? Well, yes, actually. She and Scorpia carve out a pretty solid life for themselves in the Crimson Wastes. And also, no! No, 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 no.
Shadow Weaver is in Bright Moon.
You made me this way, and you get to be the good guy? Don't you get it? I am never going to go with you.
Hey, Adora.
Despite Season 3 being a short 6 episodes, and Catra doesn't even show up in Episode 2, this is some very violent time for Catra. It's telling that her best this season comes when she is exiled to the desert. It's the first time she's been given that freedom that she really wanted the whole time, despite the fact that she's still on a mission from the Horde. In fact, we seem to forget that for the bulk of Episode 3 until the very end. And what else could cause this bliss to end but hearing that her former abuser and escaped prisoner ran off immediately to go find Adora. The inferiority complex is not shaken off that easily. This leads Catra to return to the Horde, eagerly awaiting the fulfillment of Hordak's plan, and in fact, urging it forward. And she urges it forward to a dangerous extent, disregarding Entrapta's warnings and banishing her for it. But she seems terribly unsure about that. She also hesitates when lying to Hordak that Entrapta let in the opposition. She has no idea what she's doing in these situations, but just blindly plowing ahead, focused on her anger about always being left behind no matter what she seems to do. At the end of the day, she is the one who pulls the switch which almost deletes the world. In the following 2 episodes, it's not totally clear how much of her memory Catra has at any given point, although it seems like she's without it for the majority of the first. When she does regain it, it's from one of those sweet, sweet repeat lines, reminding her of her abandonment all over again.
You promise?
I promise everything will be okay if we just stay together.
And when she does remember, it is not pretty for our girl Catra. The only thing on her mind was her perceived betrayal from Adora, and things do not get better after she's corrupted by the portal's energy. She places blame for everything that happened squarely on Adora.
You broke the world, and it is all your fault.
It shows such an external locus of control. After all, she really has performed very well herself in most goals that she's had, but she's still nowhere near happiness. She wasn't happy abandoned, she wasn't happy as an officer, she wasn't happy as second in command. The only time she was ever really happy so far was as the leader out in the wastes, despite the eventual outcome. And the only time she really made any kind of tangible progress in her position of her own accord was her violent overtaking of Shadow Weaver, despite that eventual outcome. The problem always seemed to be with somebody ruling over her, and not her own executions of the plans, leading to her obvious next move.
I thought winning would be different. Or at least more, I don't know, fun?
Season 4 Catra is about a single thing, learning she is not happy with only power. She does this first by, well, gaining power, and second, by being unhappy. So basically, more Catra as we've known her for a few seasons now. but she's finally getting everything she thinks she wants, so by the end of it all, she's, to put it lightly, not doing so good.
What are you waiting for? Do it.
At the beginning of Season 4, we have Hordak at his broodiest, blaming others for his own mistakes-iest. And Catra is over this. The girl has been through a lot, and Hordak hasn't done anything besides delegating to his subordinates and yelling at them when his own decision-making is at fault. Catra is done taking orders now, and is finally on top. I'm sure she'll be happy with this position that she's worked so long and hard for. In addition, I've kind of glazed over Catra being disrespectful to other Horde members, i.e. Scorpia. But here it is at full force, and it is the majority of Catra's emotional arc this season. Through the previous seasons, she's been annoyed by Scorpia and the other Horde members, but here is the first time she is consistently nasty to all of them. Over this time, it gets so bad that Scorpia starts testing to see if there is any limit to this abuse, and eventually deserts her post as well, and when she does, it takes Catra a good while to realize it. Whether it's out of disregard for her subordinates, or if it's denial, is up for debate. My wager is it starts off as the first, then it becomes the second. In her new position on top, Catra spends the vast majority of her time isolating herself, yelling at Scorpia to get out of her way, and getting angry. She's in a worse place emotionally since the second half of Season 3 than she's pretty much ever been. As far as positive emotion goes, there's when she triumphs over Hordak, and nearly nothing else. Well, nothing else aside from her interactions with the one-season wonder that is Double Trouble. So Double Trouble, putting the neutral in both chaotic neutral and gender neutral, is an absolute joy to have on screen. Mostly because shapeshifters are just fun to play around with in general, but also because they make the most fun we have with Catra this whole season. Double Trouble is the closest thing Catra has to a friend in Season 4, collaborating, joking around, and generally having a good time. But it's because they're getting paid, and that is made clear.
Huh, so it's money you're after.
Aren't we all, darling?
Catra explicitly says that she's not enjoying most of the time spent this season, but yet everything with Double Trouble is just a blast. They have fun tricking Hordak, they talk about how dumb the princesses are, and also reinforce the main theme of Catra's arc this season, that being a bad person means people will leave you. Double Trouble calling Catra out is harsh. Very harsh.
But did you ever stop to think? Maybe they're not the problem?
It's you. You drive them away, Wildcat.
In fact, it leaves her willing to accept her own death, but absolutely necessary for the good of our little kitten. With all her previous abandonment issues stacking on top of each other, adding in Scorpia's left her upset. Hordak made her angry. Double Trouble may not have needed to spell it out for her, but she needed to understand that lashing out is not the way to deal with abandonment. You're going to need to assess what you may have done wrong and change for the better.
Ooh, foreshadowing. Love this.
What are you doing?
I want to do that one good thing in my life, like you said. So, come with me.
Catra in Season 5 is what the fans were all waiting for. And by fans, I mean me. And likely quite a few others. She's an angry, deeply hurt girl who is finally trying to do the right thing. And if my perception is right, she's terrified of all of it. Whether it's confronting her past mistakes, turning over new leaves, or accepting her own feelings, Catra's first instinct most of the season is to literally run from it, before accepting it as the right thing to do, then going for it. She actually starts the season in a position similar to previous seasons, seemingly firmly aligned with the Horde, trying to make herself indispensable to the one actually in charge. But it's different this time around. Not just because Catra is a significantly different person than she was before, but because this time, in this form of evil organization, the previous options she took are not in any way available. In Season 1, she tries working her way up the ranks, and here, everyone who's not Horde Prime is a hive mind, all equally utilitarian, and there's no ladder to climb. In Season 2, she tries lying to maintain her position with Hordak, but Horde Prime, as we're told so many times, sees all and knows all. In Season 3, she runs away and builds a life away from the Horde, but now that Etheria has been brought into the greater cosmos, all but completely conquered by Horde Prime, there is nowhere left to run. In Season 4, she tries to take the top spot by force, but Horde Prime, running a hive mind, has an endless supply of hosts to inherit his mind, and a cult following of this extent is not something that can be usurped.
Cast out all shadows, Prime, cast out all shadows.
It's even made clear in the first episode of the season that Horde Prime does not need Catra around. In a scene where Catra does nothing but react, Horde Prime hosts dinner for her and Glimmer both, bringing out all the information that he needs from Glimmer. The same information Catra was trying to use as a bargaining chip earlier. And him bringing Catra to strictly watch is deliberate. He never even addresses her, and by the end of it, she seems resigned for the first time, deprived of any kind of agency in this system. Catra's position in the system is made very clear very early on, leaving only one course of action left. The right one. Having only Glimmer on the flagship to talk to is a very good thing, because any other person may not have had the same kind of effect. They're both super bullheaded with a close but recently somewhat antagonistic connection to Adora, allowing them to reminisce about times back home and the mistakes that they've made. While doing so, Catra comes to the conclusion that there is not a single person who cares about her, but there is someone she still cares about. So in her first truly selfless act in the entire show, she spends what remains of her freedom aboard the ship to send Glimmer off to Adora, so Adora won't come to the ship and get herself killed. God, what a moment this is. Catra, this big bad kitty cat, pulls this off, saving former enemies Glimmer and Adora, dooming herself in the process. And yet, this is still so absolutely in character for her. I mean, what's more on brand for her than pushing people away to further her own ends out of weakness in acts that are ultimately self-destructive? Then, laughing at those in a higher position than her for underestimating her. The only real difference here is her motivations. She no longer wants power, and she's completely abandoning her initial idea of freedom. She does all of this explicitly for the benefit of Adora. And Adora tosses that notion away. Catra, you should have realized, by sending Glimmer off to safety, you didn't get rid of the reason good enough to deserve a rescue mission. You became a reason good enough to deserve a rescue mission. Catra's first decent act in a long while is repaid several times over, and I don't want to hear anyone claim that Catra isn't worth all that risk. That she hasn't been shown to be a good enough person to justify this, unlike Glimmer, or that she doesn't deserve redemption. Keep in mind a few things. These guys here, they're the good guys. They save people. It's what they do. If they stop doing that, they stop being the good guys. She-Ra isn't some gritty political thriller where things like emotionless, calculated risk management needs to play a role. Thematic strength is usually more important in shows like this, and while it can be argued that the main theme is something else, to me, it is this.
You're worth more than what you can give to other people. You deserve love too.
If you think she's not worth saving, well, you might be right. But you've got that in common with Catra herself, and it really kills the show's message of hope and love if progress towards being a better person is met with indifference. And lastly, because she's the best character, my girl needs to stay in the game till the buzzer. Save the Cat sees Catra under the control of Horde Prime, and while it is super entertaining because of it, she doesn't actually get any real development here, no real decisions to make when mind-controlled. It is, however, super important to the development of Catra and Adora's dynamic from the other side, though. Adora going to such lengths to protect Catra is excruciating, and all this pain with her unflinching determination summoning She-Ra without the sword is awesome, and will be discussed more later. Also worth noting, when Catra's shown affection, she literally purrs. Despite having been rescued against overwhelming odds, Catra's still super angry, and it's pretty clear it's because she doesn't believe she deserved to be helped, and she continues to see herself as a burden, and she doesn't want to talk to anybody. However, because she's still got the chip in and has a loose connection to the hive mind, the Horde can follow them easily, and she is actually being a burden right now. And in order for her to not be, she's got to allow Entrapta to take a look at it. And we get another time when Catra's first reaction is fear, but when confronted with no other choice, she doesn't just accept the inevitable course, but she contributes alongside what else must be done. It's inevitable that the chip is going to get removed. That doesn't make her a better person. What does is spying on the Horde before the connection is severed at great psychological risk to herself. Because, after all, the one thing she needs more of is trauma. It's also a good way to stop feeling like as much of a burden, and in doing so, helping her accept that she deserves love also. Following this, Catra falls into the group dynamic pretty soundly. Episode 8 starts with Catra questioning whether the gang is really thinking of just running through a Horde blockade. Instead of this suicide run, a detour is suggested to go find answers on a planet the Horde abandoned. There, Catra resents being called cute and is confused about how she lost to these idiots. But she also shoves those idiots aside to pounce on the potential danger immediately, and befriends the potential danger, Milog, by being nice. By the end of the episode, she's then ready to run through that same blockade again, relying on a creature they just met. And not just that, but it was her idea.
That about sums it up, yes.
She's still her usual abrasive self, but suddenly, without all the cares about punishments from higher up, without the pressure from running things, she fits in remarkably well with the rest of the squad. The next couple of episodes are a bunch of the same for Catra, specifically slowly opening up and embracing the new comrades that she has, and general quippiness about how they used to be on opposite sides. The one thing that absolutely needs to be mentioned, though, is this.
You and your files don't have anything on real threats, like me.
Strongest character for 4 seasons, beats She-Ra regularly, Hordak multiple times, pretty much everyone else. Weak to a spray bottle. Anyways, just 3 episodes left in the series, and these few episodes do a phenomenal job of wrapping up a number of things in her journey towards being a decent person. And it does this through reintroducing Catra to Shadow Weaver. Now, both on the same side, and good aligned side, their dynamic is very similar to how it had been previously, with Shadow Weaver favoring Adora perpetually, and Catra being the subject of derision, as well as insisting Adora is better without Catra holding her back.
If your emotions are blocking you from becoming She-Ra, it's all of Etheria's business.
That second one is particularly egregious now, because Catra has been the only reason Adora's been able to summon She-Ra without the sword. The first 2 times she did was number 1, to save Catra, and number 2, to save everyone on board their ship, after talking extensively with Catra, who was in the most danger on the ship. Their relationship has changed, however, in a couple of aspects. First, Catra has been on her own for quite a while now, and she doesn't need to rely on Adora to protect her from Shadow Weaver. And second, Catra's looking out for others now as well. She wants to do more than just survive and endure Shadow Weaver's scorn, she wants to help further the goals of the group. So when Shadow Weaver is intentionally leaving things out and being suspicious, Catra calls her on it.
Why does it have to be Adora? What is going to happen to her? What aren't you telling us?
Revealing she's forcing Adora into a very dangerous situation.
Only She-Ra can hope to survive the process. No one else can do it.
What happens across the remainder of the series mirrors the first real conflict we see between Catra and Adora, when Adora first abandons the Horde and as a result, Catra. Adora, when met with this extremely dangerous, potentially martyr-like situation, thrusts all responsibility for it onto herself because she feels a moral obligation to it. And Catra is not on board with this. Well, it seems like she's opposed this time because it's not a decision Adora makes for herself. Much like the first time, it can easily be read as abandonment. After all, if she dies for a cause, she's still leaving everyone on Etheria behind. But the perspective is actually flipped here. With them both against the Horde now, Adora pulling her moral obligation stuff leaves Catra as the one who is physically leaving this time around. Also, it greatly helps that this time, Catra has some moral ground to stand on. Previously, it was purely selfish.
And soon we'll be the ones calling the shots. And now you're gonna throw everything away for them?
But now, she's asking Adora to be selfish for the first time in a while.
Why do you always have to sacrifice everything for everyone else? When do you get to choose?
And she says Adora can do what she wants, but I don't have to stay and watch it happen, which can be a very healthy mindset to have. If someone's being intentionally self-destructive, sometimes getting out is the best thing you can do for yourself. But also, sometimes they need your help more than ever. So, through the whole season, Catra's been introduced to being a good guy through baby steps. Essentially, her options were cut off when she had the choice of becoming part of the Horde hive mind or rebelling and helping Glimmer. Her options were cut off when she had the option of having her chip removed or never confronting someone she wronged ever again. Two things that would have been huge steps for her if she made them with other legitimate choices. In this most recent case, however, we have a choice mirroring the first choice she's ever presented with. The start of her spiral towards bad choices and worse consequences. This time, though, it's actually a much harder decision. Catra has legitimate cause to walk away if Adora is going to continue willfully putting herself in mortal danger. But also, if Catra walks away, that mortal danger is much more likely to become mortal. And even if it isn't, that's not the kind of thing that can be forgiven easily. At the end of the day, of course, she chooses to return to Adora, and in the process does a whole lot of yelling at Shadow Weaver because, of course, she deserves it. Shadow Weaver pulls a Darth Vader, and Catra escorts Adora to the heart of Etheria, where she cannot become She-Ra, and therefore will die to finally defeat the Horde. Catra is told to go and reverse her previous decision, but Catra, stubborn as ever, is going to stay there with Adora no matter the consequences, in the ultimate reversal of the first poor decision she ever made. She also is the first to admit her feelings for Adora, and through granting her the motivation required to summon She-Ra again, literally saves Adora's life by doing so. And so ends the best character arc in the show. She also arguably has the most agency to affect the actual outcome of the story of every character, including Adora. In fact, she's so good a character that of every character she interacts with, that character is likely to have their best, or at least one of their best, character dynamics with Catra. Think about it. Adora and Scorpia both are obviously best when interacting with Catra, but look at Shadow Weaver, who only shows more depth than Menacing Puppet Master with Catra. Look at Horde Prime, who unfortunately doesn't have that good a dynamic with Adora from a lack of personal connection. But for the short time he's with Catra, has a couple of his best scenes, as well as the only time he's caught off guard by a betrayal. Look at Double Trouble, who is only really free to be themselves around their employer. And also, their best scene is specifically regarding Catra. Then there's Hordak, who arguably has a better dynamic with Entrapta, but the top two are between her and Catra. Entrapta's the same, where she's best with Hordak, but those initial scenes where she's not understanding the prisoner and warden dynamic are beautiful. Catra is a character so good that she doesn't even need to carry the scene herself. She's not just the best lead, she's the best character in a supporting role as well. Because of her wide-ranging arc, she's also the one writers are most confident in throwing into interesting dynamics. Intimidated subordinate, check. Rebellious daughter, check. Speaking truth to power, check. Prisoner, check. Warden, check. Abuser, check. Abuse victim, check. Exile, check. Paranoid tyrant, check. And so on. But again, I must stress, Catra is not just enjoyable because of the depth and range of character, because even without the best character arc and dynamics by a wide margin, her mannerisms and comedy are also the best.
Unappreciated in all I do. Why can't they see that I'm very cool?
I mean, second best. Seahawk is the funniest guy here. But really, Catra's humor comes from a number of different places, while even Seahawk's tends to be concentrated on robust bravado or sea shanty. Catra's got quite a bit of range with her comedic chops, mostly from deadpan honesty.
It'd be funny if she weren't such a terrible person.
But also beautiful lampshading.
Because Adora and her friends are always after the same thing we are. Of course they're in the literal middle of nowhere.
And just being a cat. In fact, that alone is a source of quite a bit of entertainment. With a number of characters, they're humanoid, not 100% human, and our girl Catra is one of them. This is never really plot relevant, outside of Double Trouble's shapeshifting, but it gives a little bit of character to some characters. Among the more prominent are Angela with prominent wings and an elongated neck, Scorpia's got claws that I always confuse for lobsters, and Rogelio is straight up a lizard man and can't speak like the other characters. Maybe it's because we're more familiar with cat mannerisms better than a Scorpion's or Angel's, or maybe it's because she's a more major character. But again, Catra gets the best use of these non-human mannerisms. Plenty of times we see her just climbing around, hissing and purring. She frequently runs on all fours, and she scratches quite a bit. It seems that at nearly every turn, the creators spent extra effort to make Catra not just compelling, but entertaining, and just utterly captivating in every aspect. Before even writing the script, I knew there was going to be something special about her, but after putting her under the microscope, I'm just more and more fascinated by parts of her over and over. At the beginning of writing, I thought it might have been that I'm just a sucker for redemption arcs, because I am absolutely a sucker for redemption arcs. But no, at the end of it, I am more deeply convinced than ever that Catra is forever going to be my main reason for rewatching this show, because she is the character worth watching an entire show for. Next time, I'll be talking about a show worth watching for a single story arc.